Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. We travel to Illinois, where legalized marijuana sales started January 1st.
We've seen the Illinois industry itself expand greatly from having about 3,000 patients to now almost 100,000 patients.
In part 2 of our series on marijuana legalization, we look into whether the economic benefits in other states could influence Indiana lawmakers. Governor Holcomb says he's all in on boosting teacher pay.
$50 million a year will be generated to redirect to teacher pay.
But he wants to wait until next year to do it. Democrats say those pay hikes need to come now. Coming up, our Statehouse reporter talks about priorities laid out in the State of the State address. And physicians say safe sleep practices are one of the most effective ways to reduce infant deaths. Just ahead, a look at the debate surrounding new recommendations. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, last week we looked at the momentum or lack thereof marijuana-related legislation has in Indiana. Despite the state being one of just 17 without a medical cannabis program, and neighboring states including Illinois and Michigan allowing recreational sales, it doesn't appear that Hoosiers will be able to purchase legal cannabis anytime soon. In spite of that, some Hoosiers are still using it, and the market is growing rapidly in other states. Reporter Brock Turner has more.
On January 1st, Illinois legalized recreational marijuana sales, but for years, advocates had been laying the groundwork.
In the summer of 2014, when Illinois started the process of implementing the law it had passed to create a medical cannabis industry. So that meant passing regulations and then issuing a competitive cultivation application and competitive dispensary applications.
That's Dina Rollman. She's one of the folks who ensures one of the largest dispensaries in Illinois remains compliant. Rollman says positions like hers, which are now common, didn't exist back then.
There was no such thing as a cannabis lawyer in Illinois in 2014, but I sort of was intent on becoming one.
Rollman's own career path reflects the growth of her companies.
We've seen the Illinois industry itself expand greatly from having about 3,000 patients to now almost 100,000 patients and being on the cusp of recreational. And GTI itself went from being just an Illinois-only entity with one dispensary to now having 34 dispensaries open across the country. We're now publicly traded. We operate in, I think, 11 states. And so, you know, sort of the Illinois growth has mirrored GTI's growth in a lot of ways.
The rapid growth across the country has been slow to take off here in Indiana. State policymakers routinely cite the federal government's classification of cannabis as a Schedule I drug without medical benefits as a reason for not debating legislation. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb spoke last year about where he stood on the issue.
Not allowing some hodgepodge national effort to organically spring up because folks are looking the other way. This would require medical research and science to give us the true evidence on both the medicinal value and the efficacy of recreational use. That's not here yet. As I understand it, there's about a 12-acre farm in Mississippi that's responsible for doing the research.
The FDA has one approved site in Mississippi, but research is being done across the country. Andy Seeger is the cannabis research manager at Chicago-based Brightfield Group. He and his colleagues research cannabis for companies that produce everything from common household goods to alcohol.
Some of the biggest growth rates we're seeing in users are 65 plus. We're seeing now that brands are coming online targeted to consumers, we're seeing female usage going up and normalizing. So it is across age groups, it's across racial lines, it's across gender lines, it's across income lines. It's up with everybody. We've now hit critical mass.
And many users are searching for products that improve their quality of life rather than give them a high.
We're seeing big growth in the market for the medicinal side. Patient numbers are way up. Adding things like chronic pain brings in a lot of patients. And that's the number one thing that we see users in our consumer data are using cannabis for when it's medicinal is chronic pain.
Jeff Staker is one of them. He spent 11 years in active duty serving in the military and has spent nearly his entire career working for the federal government in the civil service. He says he was prescribed opiates through the VA for nearly 10 years to treat chronic back pain, but he reached a point where his doctor no longer felt comfortable prescribing them.
I was running the risk of accidentally overdosing. So in 2016, my doctor and I, obviously we discontinued it, and I got off the meds and stuff, and I asked my doctor what he thought about medical cannabis and all the states passing these medical cannabis laws. And he said that if he could prescribe and recommend it, he would, but he can't because of obviously the federal restrictions and everything. So I started Hoosier Veterans for Medical Cannabis.
Staker applied for a medical cannabis card through the state of California, and from there it was pretty easy. He receives his cannabis just like any other medication from the VA near his home in northern Indiana.
Yeah, I have a family, and it doesn't deter from any of it. It gives me a better quality of life. Other than that, maybe I would have to sit around and nurse my my ailments with something else that wouldn't be so beneficial to me.
Staker has made it his mission to inform people about the benefits. That's one of the reasons he started the advocacy group Hoosier Veterans for Medical Cannabis.
So we're gonna keep up the good fight, and I'm there to support you, and you support me. I appreciate it, and let's keep moving forward. Thank you.
Despite calls from advocates, there doesn't appear to be much momentum to declassify the drug federally, which is likely what's keeping Indiana from having much of a conversation. The industry, however, isn't waiting.
The money is really going to be the accelerator here. It's what's going to lean on politicians, it's what's going to lean on markets to open, it's what's going to lean on what happens. This is big time now. This is big money. This is the backroom money that gets things done. These are big companies that are going multi-state operators so that they've got locations in each state, despite state restrictions saying you need to grow, process, and sell within a state. Well, we'll just go to that state and set all three of those up, and now we have a presence there as well. So, this is quickly professionalizing from just people growing on their own and wanting to be left alone to a completely new, big sin industry.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brock Turner.
Jeff Staker recently announced he will run for a seat as Senate representative and will make legalizing marijuana part of his platform. Governor Eric Holcomb announced a plan that would boost teacher pay at his State of the State address this week, but he says he doesn't want to roll the plan out until next year. Democrats object to the delay, but the governor and Republican leaders insist that changes have to wait until the next budget. With us to talk about that and some of the other issues outlined in the address is Statehouse reporter Brandon Smith. So Brandon, maybe the biggest headline from the state is Governor Holcomb's plan to try and boost teacher pay as part of now next year's budget session. Tell us a little bit about that plan and why it has drawn criticism from some of the Democrats.
Well, the governor is proposing to take one-time dollars, $250 million in one-time dollars, so not an ongoing expense, and pay down part of a teacher pension fund that the state has to make payments to for the next couple of decades, almost. By doing so, that would free up about $50 million a year in the state budget, and the governor would want that, says he wants that to be spent on teacher pay. The problem that Democrats have is that he doesn't want to start doing that until 2021, in the 2021 budget. And Democrats say there's no reason that the legislature couldn't do that right now, this very minute, at the State House. But the governor and Republicans say, well, we're not reopening the current budget. We're going to wait until next year, and that rankles Democrats.
The governor also announced a plan to make adoptions quicker and easier. Can you tell us a little bit about the details of that plan?
Yeah, that took a lot of people by surprise, because what he's done is he's created a first of its kind in Indiana special adoption unit at the Department of Child Services. And it took people by surprise because I think a lot of us thought there wasn't already an adoption unit at DCS, but there wasn't. Adoptions were basically handled by family case managers in the course of all the other work that they already do. What this will do is dedicate employees throughout the state who just work on adoption cases for the department, just handle finding those kids permanent homes, freeing up the time of those family case managers who are still so burdened by cases.
And a House bill, it would ban the sale of vitamin E acetate in tobacco products. Do you see that bill actually addressing, though, the recent spate of deaths that's been related to vaping?
Well, this is part of the larger bill to raise the smoking and vaping age from 18 to 21. That language about vitamin E acetate was added into it in the House. And yes, that's exactly what they're trying to get at, is this recent rash of vaping deaths both here in Indiana and across the country, because the federal CDC has identified vitamin E acetate as the substance that's the primary cause or the primary culprit behind these deaths. It's used as a thickening agent or a diluting agent, depending on what you're putting it into, but it's sort of gumming up the lungs of these people and in some cases killing them.
All right, Brandon, thank you very much. We will look forward to more coverage from the Statehouse this coming week.
Thank you, Joe.
Now we'll take a look at headlines and the latest on this week's top stories. Results of HUD's 2019 annual homeless assessment report show the number of people experiencing homelessness in Indiana was up about 4% in the last year. Shalom Center Executive Director Reverend Forrest Gilmore says the state increase for 2019 was reflected in Bloomington, the city with the highest poverty rate in the state.
After about 4 years of relative stability in the number of people experiencing homelessness, we saw a pretty significant jump in the number.
He says housing affordability is an issue that plagues the city. Other factors he listed included declining wages and decreases in federal funding for Housing First programs. Well, a judge has granted class action status to a lawsuit alleging Indiana University breached its contract by providing substandard living assignments to thousands of students staying in residential halls where mold was found. The ruling comes as 2 IU residence centers are being renovated where mold has been a problem. Those projects made more than 2,000 beds unavailable at the residence halls, forcing students to live off campus. Plaintiffs are seeking to recover damages, but a dollar amount has not been determined. The university has provided millions of dollars to students affected by mold issues as part of a reimbursement plan. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb raised nearly $2 million in the last 6 months of 2019, leaving him with just under $7.5 million in the bank for his 2020 re-election bid. The governor's fundraising dwarfs that of the 2 Democratic candidates, neither of which have raised more than $200,000. Indiana Chief Justice Loretta Rush issued a call to arms for everyone involved in the state's justice system in her annual State of the Judiciary address this week. Rush praised the state's problem-solving courts, improved court technology, and pretrial and criminal justice reform. But she pointed to one glaring area of need: legal aid. She says too many people go unrepresented in court.
I recently spent a morning in small claims court. This morning's docket, and this was just the morning docket, had 275 eviction cases. None of the defendant tenants had representation, not one. They all faced the judge and opposing lawyer alone.
Rush says lawmakers need to provide more funding for legal aid services. Well, the former president of Franklin College is facing charges of child enticement and exposing a child to harmful material. Police say Thomas Minar contacted what he thought was a teenage boy on a dating app. It was actually an undercover officer. Franklin College fired Minar shortly after his arrest. Minar posted bond and is due back in court January 27th. An Indiana steelmaker is denying allegation that it manipulated test results required after a chemical spill killed more than 3,000 fish last year. State regulators say ArcelorMittal's steel plant in Burns Harbor has been redoing tests and score to regulators. Item officials say they cannot feel confident in the reports and that they question the company's ability to police itself. ArcelorMittal denies the allegations. Well, one of the most controversial aspects of the Bloomington's Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, was the incorporation of plexes into the city's core neighborhoods. That provision wasn't included in the final plan because of pushback from residents. As part of our City Limits Bloomington series, reporter Mitch Legan answers a viewer's question who wonders, what is a core neighborhood?
Part of Deborah Meyerson's job is to be invested in the overhauling of Bloomington's zoning guide, or Unified Development Ordinance. Much of that discussion revolves around development in the city's core neighborhoods. But as the debate continued, Meyerson says she began to wonder where that name, core neighborhoods, came from and what it actually means.
I can guess what I think it means, but I'm eager for maybe City Limits to help figure out, is there something more precise that we can use to help everybody have a shared understanding of what we're talking about?
The short answer is no. There's no official definition for core neighborhoods in Bloomington. City officials say the closest former plans have gotten is defining the residential core zoning district, which is currently mapped around downtown and Indiana University.
From my perspective, I couldn't find any official definition that says core neighborhood, is A, B, and C, these neighborhoods. Generally, again, they apply or used in context with the older neighborhoods.
Former City Council member Chris Sturbaum says the city's core neighborhoods represent the original Bloomington.
The core neighborhood, in my mind, is the pre-World War II, pre-Depression city. So there's this small city inside a large city. And the small city was built before automobiles were dominant.
The previous plan says the residential core contains neighborhoods of cottages and bungalows built at higher densities than more recent residential development. Since the residential core is really just a zoning district, the city doesn't maintain a list of its core neighborhoods. But when you take a look at the current zoning map, parts of 12 neighborhoods make up the city's core. But Robinson says at this point, the core neighborhood designation is mainly up to the neighborhoods themselves.
City planners are now renaming old districts, which means the residential core will now become the R3 or residential small lot district. But it's safe to say Bloomington won't be adding any core neighborhoods anytime soon. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana state guidelines meant to reduce infant deaths is causing confusion for some parents. And the Monroe County Library joins several other libraries across the country to make its collection more accessible to those who need it most. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
In a time of change, where can you find in-depth reporting and thoughtful analysis? Washington Week on PBS. Join moderator Robert Costa.
When I was at the Capitol this week, I encountered the same.
And a panel of award-winning journalists.
You're seeing a divided nation, and you're seeing
for insights and perspective.
Tonight there was a key development in the Senate.
You won't find anywhere else.
What a week.
Washington Week.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, late fees are going away at the Monroe County Public Library. As Benta Boutier reports, it's part of a growing national movement.
The new policy is meant to remove barriers for library patrons. Library officials say charging late fees was just meant to deter people from holding books past their due date, but they've become an impediment that prevents people from getting access to library resources.
We really want to get those customers back in the library, people who've been disenfranchised by fees, and really be a place that everyone feels welcome regardless of ability to pay for library services.
The Board of Trustees voted unanimously in favor of the decision this week.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the proposal to eliminate fines, which the details of that include waiving collection agency fees, waiving unpaid overdue fees, and waiving replacement fees over 6 years old. All in favor of approving the proposal to eliminate fines, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And thank you again to the team that worked on this.
To replace late return fees, the library will start sending more notifications about late materials. And if your materials are more than 3 weeks late, you'll hear from the library again.
So if you are behind in your borrowing, you'll get a bill for the cost of the item much more aggressively than you do currently.
But that bill goes away as soon as you bring the items back. He says that by eliminating late fines, return rates for materials will improve,
which is something that other libraries who have gone fine-free have experienced.
Some other Indiana public libraries that have already adopted this system include Greenwood, Evansville, Owen, and Bartholomew County Public Libraries. The new system will have a soft rollout and overdue fees will stop being charged now that the proposal is passed.
However, it'll take us a little bit of time to clear the fees that are currently on people's records.
The new system will officially be implemented at the beginning of March. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
Indiana consistently ranks among the worst states when it comes to infant mortality. One of the ways the State Department of Health says parents can reduce that risk is by using safe sleep practices. But as Barbara Brozier reports, recent changes to the state's safe sleep guidelines for licensed child care providers are causing confusion for some parents.
Amanda Morris is adjusting to life with a newborn again.
Well, I've got a 5-year-old who will be 6 in December and started kindergarten this year, and then I've got this one who's 4 weeks old.
Her son Arthur may be quiet now, but don't let him fool you.
It's 3 a.m. and he's screaming, and he's just not feeling the security that he had. And so we swaddle. We wrap up his feet in particular, because he's a kicker.
Like lots of parents, swaddling is one of the tools Morris uses to soothe Arthur as he adjusts to his new world. It's a special method of wrapping a baby in a blanket, and it was common in daycares across the state, too.
Swaddling is a real great way to help soothe an infant, that tight feeling of feeling like they may still be in the womb or their mother's arms. It is helpful. In a child care setting, it's helpful because it can be a little crazy at times in rooms, and swaddling helps them feel secure and safe.
But earlier this year, the state changed its safe sleep rules for licensed child care providers. The new guidelines say infants can no longer be swaddled in those settings. It's been a big adjustment for the staff at Kid Angles in Bloomington.
So we had 3 start right before the licensing rule changed, so they were already started to be swaddled here. Then when that rule came out and it changed, our staff looked at me in fear, and I said, it's okay, we'll talk to the parents.
Fletcher says the new rules can be confusing for parents who might wonder if it's safe to continue swaddling their child at home.
Because the swaddling is something that new moms use to help their child, and then they go looking for childcare when they have to go back to work, and then they're told, oh, we can't swaddle your infant. It's scary for them.
Dr. Emily Scott is medical director of the Well Newborn Unit at IU Health Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis, where they teach new parents how to swaddle before they head home.
So this is a sleep sack, and this makes swaddling very easy for parents to do.
Scott says it's appropriate for parents to swaddle their newborns, but only for a short period of time.
So when babies reach about 2 months of age, they're at that age where they might start rolling over. So they may roll from their back onto their tummies. And when babies are rolling, we want to make sure their arms are free, because if they get over to their tummies, we want to make sure that they're able to push their body back up if they start to get into trouble where their face is starting to get kind of planted into a softer surface.
If babies are still swaddled when they're able to roll over, the risk of sudden infant death syndrome increases. That's why national guidelines from Caring for Our Children say swaddling in childcare settings is not necessary or recommended. Most infants are at least 6 weeks old by the time they enter childcare, and the more active babies become, the higher the risk of serious health outcomes if they remain swaddled. Morris says while she was initially worried about the new childcare rules and how Arthur would adjust, she understands it's what's safest for her baby, so she's doing what she can to prepare for the transition.
We are working on more of a loose swaddle. Like, I want him to feel secure, but I don't. It's going to contradict what they can do at schools.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
The state says parents should also practice the ABCs of safe sleep, which means a baby should sleep alone on its back and in their own crib or bassinet. Well, IU's new Metz Carillon will chime 200 times on Monday to celebrate the university's bicentennial. Jacobs School of Music organ curator Patrick Fisher says it's the springs, wires, and clappers that do the work.
These levers are not swinging the bell, they're just moving a clapper. And the clapper isn't all that far from the bell. It's not like it's being thrown 2 feet or something.
The tower is about 13 stories tall. The largest bell is almost 7 feet in diameter and weighs more than 6 tons. IU has funded a position in Carillon playing that they hope will lead to a regular schedule of concerts. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.